Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Mic Check Podcast. This is T Word, the People's Champ. Here, my co-host Q, aka Right on Q. We're back in this thing, and today we're going to be talking about Jaron Boots Ennis, Terrence Crawford, and the welterweight division. Before we get into the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We appreciate your feedback. All right, Q.
Yeah.
All right, man. It's the welterweight division.
Waiting some more.
We hearing Boots. We hearing Bud. Way back here, we hearing Errol and Rosha.
Yeah.
What's up with it, man? What do you think about this whole Boots and Bud thing that's been going down over the last week or so?
I mean, you and I have talked about it on a couple of occasions, but there's a lot of reports coming out this week that there were some potential negotiations. There were some phone calls that were made between Crawford's team or Crawford directly with Showtime. In regards to an Ennis fight, Bozy Ennis, Jaron Ennis, his father, has come out on a few platforms and basically made their stance known that they want a Crawford fight. My kind of initial stance on it, and I'll go ahead and pull up the article for everybody else that wants to go ahead and check it out. That's a Boxing Scene article that kind of sparked this conversation between T and myself. My thought on it was initially, the only secure way to guarantee yourself a fight with a particular fighter that owns a belt is to become that person's mandatory. And even then, it's not a guarantee, right? There's no such thing as a free lunch in boxing. There's no such thing as a guarantee in boxing. But that is the closest thing you can get to a guarantee. It's to be somebody's number one challenger, and then for the mandatory to get called, or for you to petition for that mandatory.
Right.
Now, I have a funny story to tell you. Carlos Adames is saying, hold my beer, because Carlos Adames went to the WBC convention as the interim champion and requested to be Jermall Charlo's mandatory, and that was declined for whatever reason that there is. So obviously we know that it's not guaranteed.
Right.
But once Ennis, in my opinion, decided to go the IBF route to pick up a interim title, I kind of was like, well, you kind of chosen your route, and you're either hoping that, Errol stays around long enough for you to get that fight, or eventually he vacates and then you become IBF world champion. Right. You must have not really wanted Crawford that badly. But it seems like things have turned around. So what are your thoughts on how all this has landed and kind of where you see things going from here? Because in my opinion, I don't see a Errol Spence fight happening for Crawford just because of the difficulty of the initial negotiation. I think that this is the best next thing that we can probably get from Terrence Crawford, this year, in my opinion.
So I'll start backwards with what you're saying. So as an option two, for Terrence Crawford, yes, I do agree. I would rather see this fight than any other besides Errol Spence. As far as the mandatory thing, I think without going too far into it, I think the timeline provides the right amount of context. When people say, Jaron Ennis left the WBO path to pursue the IBF, that literally didn't happen until December. So there was a time frame between May, when he went from, in April, he was number 3 in the IBF. In May, he became number 1, beating Castillo Clayton in the second round knockout. That said, he was still just number 1. He was also number 2 in the WBO rankings from November of 2021 when Terrence Crawford beat Sean Porter. And he remained there until January 7th, 2023, when Jaron Ennis beat Karen Chukajan for the IBF interim. So for over a year, he was sitting at number 2, and there was an opportunity for him and Terrence Crawford to get a fight. Now, whatever promotional ties, network ties, or whatever could have been in the way, from my understanding, there was no conversation until January of 2023, after he became the interim champion. BLK and Terrence Crawford reached out through Blue Blood Sports TV and Zab Judah, and there was a meeting between Bozy Ennis, Steven Espinoza, BLK Prime, and Zab Judah, but nothing came of it. Now, to get into the last thing that you mentioned, which was there likely isn't an Errol Spence fight. The reason that Boots and Bud likely aren't fighting is because my understanding from YSM Sports Media and Steven Espinoza directly, Spence and Crawford are negotiating, and because Terrence Crawford has been mandated, he had 20 days to book a fight with Alexis Rocha. The only thing he can do outside of fight Rocha is fight Errol Spence, because that unification with Trump are mandatory. So I tend to believe that that's happening, because I haven't heard anything about a deal between him and Rocha being set. And then worst case scenario goes to purse bid, and that favors Crawford anyway, because it's a 75-25 split. So that's kind of my opinion of where things stand. Based on that information, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts, I guess, initially are that while he did leave the ranking system after Crawford took a voluntary defense against a guy who was ranked below him, I guess my thought would just be that, well, if this is the guy that you want, if this is the fight that's going to make you the biggest money, because let's be playing with it. I mean, Jaron Ennis, as talented as he is, he's not a fighter that's even headlined yet. So the money he's making could only be so good. This is the fight that gets him over the top. This is the fight that puts him into the wide scope of all boxing audiences that there can be. You stay on that path and you petition. You know, Ortiz, he left the WBO rank in the same time as Jaron Ennis. Maybe what you do in that situation is you petition and you don't give up your position in that sanctioning body. And then the WBO has to flat out say, we're skipping over you to give this opportunity to Rocha. Now, if they do that, then, okay, you ain't got no choice. You got to go another route. There's got to be something else you got to do, because this organization doesn't want to help you. But very similarly, if you think about it, while it took him a long time, Dillian White was in a very similar situation in the WBC rankings, where he was the number one guy. He had the WBC silver title for almost 2 years. Now, he did lose it, but then he won the rematch against Alexander Povetkin, reclaimed his position in the WBC rankings, and eventually the fight he wanted is the fight that happened. He wanted to fight Tyson Fury. It took way longer than it was supposed to, but he got the fight. Why? Because Tyson Fury had no choice. Eventually, the mandatory had to be called, because it was going to be just blatant, corruption if they just never give the dude any mandatories ever during a title reign that lasts more than 3 years. I think that he kind of gave up on that route just too soon, because unfortunately, everybody knew back when he fought Porter that they were going to give him more than a year's time before they were going to call another mandatory. I think right after that, they said they were going to do something between 12 to 18 months. Well, 18 months is going to hit right around the time that they're calling this fight to happen. And unfortunately, it just seems like some bad timing on his part that he decided to go another route at a point where he should have at least petitioned to get the mandatory before he decided to leave.
Yeah, I mean, I think he could have stayed in the path a little longer, but I mean, I also don't necessarily see an issue with him aligning an opportunity to either take a title from the guy that has 3 belts or fight the guy for the 3 belts.
Do you think he does? Because I don't.
Well, I'm not certain what's going to happen with Spence here. Like, I think once this whole situation with Bud is resolved for Errol Spence, then he's moving to 154 no matter what. If he wins or loses versus Bud, once he fights him, that's going to solidify his legacy, because he can say, I fought every marquee welterweight in my era, and he'll be able to move on whether he wins or loses. If he wins, obviously he moves up as a undisputed champion. If he loses, he can put that on his resume. People give Sean Porter credit for losing most of his biggest fights. You know what I'm saying? So that's not going to be a stain on his record to have a loss to Terrence Crawford, in my opinion, regardless. That being said, I don't know what that means for Jaron Ennis, because I don't necessarily think he's going to ever get to fight Errol Spence at this point. But you weren't guaranteed a shot at Bud, because you sat in the rankings for all that time and you literally were passed over for a voluntary.
But did you petition?
I mean, but did David Avenesian call Bud? Because as I understand it, they actually pulled him out of a fight.
Right. But here's my thing. David Avenesian may not have wanted the fight, but if somebody offers me $100, I'll take it. But if you owe me $100, guess what I'm going to be doing? Knock, knock, knock. Hey, where's my $100? If I'm in Jaron Ennis' position, if I'm his promoter, if I'm his team, if I'm his dad, if I'm him, file the paperwork. That's the thing that I have had an issue with everybody that wants to say, oh, well, Ennis didn't get a fair shake. Oh, well, Crawford is ducking him. If that's the case, file the paperwork. Does it give you 100% of a guarantee? No, because Carlos Adames did the same thing. He filed the paperwork. He went to the convention. But guess what we can say now? Jermall is a duck. We can say that now with no questions asked.
Well, we don't know why it was declined, but
we do know that he doesn't want to fight him, though, right?
Well, I mean, I hadn't seen him say, I don't want to fight that dude, so I don't know that. I mean, he's been out the ring for 2 years. I don't know what he's doing, actually.
Here's what I will say. Carlos deserves the title shot. The WBC obviously doesn't want to give it to him, so no one will blame him for going in a different direction now.
Yeah,
if that scenario had happened for Jaron Ennis, in my opinion, that would have put Crawford on the spot the same way that I think a lot of people are now putting Jermall on the spot for not obliging him if they know that now he's saying, okay, I'm next. What's good?
Now, let me ask you this. What if that's 160, right? I'm trying to think of somebody at 160 that's like top 10 that don't have some type of interim silver, gold, maroon belt, whatever it might be. Let's just think about that. Whatever it might be, a dude that don't have some type of belt that entitles him to some type of shot. Somebody in the 160 that's around where David Avenesian was. This is how I'm going to compare apples to apples.
I mean, I wouldn't say him because he hasn't won a fight at the weight yet. But if it was like Jared Hurd or J-Rock Williams or
I get what you're saying, though. Okay, so let's say that. Let's say Lubin.
Top 10, but none of those guys have won a fight at 160 yet. So.
Right, but let's just say Adames is sitting there. Let's say Jermall Charlo actually doesn't fight Adames, but he grabs Lubin.
Okay.
Or somebody else at 160 that's actually below Adames.
Okay.
That's more like, okay, you dodged this guy to fight somebody that's actually ranked below him. That's obviously, this guy's a tougher fight.
Right.
That's what I'm looking at. It's like you kind of skip over Ennis, and I'm not calling it a dodge. I mean, you did what they said. If I'm to believe what has been said, it was a lot easier to acquire the services of David Avenesian to come and get knocked out than it was to get a fight with Jaron Ennis. That's what we've been told. So if that's the case, that's how they're legitimizing not calling Boots for a fight at that point. Because if you're in that position in October, he didn't file to become the interim until October 23rd. The announcement for Crawford versus Avenesian was October 20th. On October 23rd, Bozy Ennis says, we just filed with the IBF to go ahead and push that mandatory because we just found out Spencer Crawford ain't fighting. That literally happened after that fight was announced. So if you see that, okay, this dude ain't gonna call me. If I petition, who's to say I'm gonna get that fight any damn way?
You may not.
I might as well take a path that's gonna put me in line and ensure that in the future, because remember, his career doesn't stop when Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford retire or move on. He's got to think that from a business standpoint, I have a potential to get this interim title, which either I'm going to fight the champion and get the full belt if I beat him, or if that dude leaves this division and drops that belt, I'm going to get that title. So now when I go to negotiate these other fights, if anybody wants to be undisputed, they got to come see me.
Yeah.
And I got a straight path to the belt, and I'm going to win it in the ring because he beat somebody for that interim title. Yeah. And then he'll have to defend the full belt if Errol Spence is to vacate. So to me, I don't see the duck perspective. I'm like, bro, it's business.
And I'm not at all saying that Jaron Ennis is in a position where he's avoiding Crawford or Crawford's avoiding him. My perspective is just that I would have advised in that situation that before you decide to go a different route because you think that this guy or this organization is not obliging you, you filed a formal paperwork. That's just my end-all stance on it. When you get to a number one ranking and a guy feels like he's been wronged, guess what he does? He files the paperwork. And if he files the paperwork and he really wants to get the fight and the fight doesn't happen, guess what he does? He goes to court. I can give you another perfect example. Lennox Lewis lost to Hasim Rahman, and Rahman wanted to move on even though Lennox Lewis had a rematch clause. Well, guess what? Lennox took him to court. Lennox didn't just say, well, I'm just going to go another route and I'll see him down the road. Which it seems like it's kind of what's happening now, because honestly, I don't think Spence is going to stay at 147. I don't think that he's going to get to fight him. He's going to get a vacant title, in my opinion now. And the biggest fight that he can have in that division at this point, I think, is probably going to be a Crawford fight. So, I mean, I guess it may all work out for him because maybe he gets the vacant title, and then now he's not a mandatory challenger, but he's a guy with a belt that can negotiate with Crawford to get a bigger split. Maybe that's what he's trying to get at. But a lot of things are in the air on that, because that may not happen either. You may have to fight somebody else for a while before you get another big name in the division. Because what if Crawford? They may even move up as well. So it's all immaterial now, because that's not the fight that's going to happen next. But I just really wish that he would have filed the paperwork to see if the WBO would have gone ahead and gave him the shot.
Yeah, I think that there's legitimacy to that particular argument. I just think that after he got skipped over, he just felt like this isn't going to happen. I'm going to go this other route. And I think it just aligns more opportunities, because those belts are already on that side anyway. And the people that are in line, for the most part, to give him an opportunity to get at the WBA, there's people that already do business with Showtime and PBC, which is going to be, let's say Mantis Stanionis beats Virgil Ortiz. He's going to have access really quick to that WBA belt. Let's say, remember, we're talking about Errol Spence being gone. The WBC, Keith Thurman is in line to get that other belt. So Boots is right there. So if I'm going to pick something that's going to make it easier for me to get to where I need to be from a business standpoint, things that legitimately can be done in black and white, this might be the path I'm going to take after I've been skipped over that one time. And that's a matter of opinion. Some people look at it like, well, he wasn't skipped over. He didn't put himself in a position to get called by Terrence Crawford. But I'm like, it was a phone call away. Make the offer. He wasn't even offered, because when they asked about it, they said Boots' name never came up. And then Blue Blood backdoored that and said, we just thought maybe it might be too expensive to get Boots into a Crawford fight at that time. So we'll probably leave it right there, folks. We definitely want to get you all to chime in on the conversation. Tell us what you think. Do you agree with me? Do you agree with Q? We'd love to get your thoughts. This has been T Word and Q for the Mic Check Podcast. Until the next time, peace.